I was a nuclear submarine captain, and I'm going to talk about power today. Actually, I'm going to talk about power and fear. I spent 7 years of my life underwater. And you may think, what kind of a slightly awkward, geeky, introverted person would choose a career where you spend 7 years of your life separated from the rest of humanity? And you'd be exactly correct, because if you're a geek in high school and for some reason you join the military, you become a submariner. I was on the math team, and yes, we had a math team, and the chess club. I get together with my buddies after school, and we'd reenact the Battle of Waterloo. Napoleon never won, by the way. And the amazing thing about my story is that I set down this path, and I actually became the captain of a nuclear submarine. It was my dream. And after being in the Navy for 17 years, the Navy sends out a message, and they announce the captains for the next year. And my name was on the list, and it was so exciting. And next to my name was the name of this submarine, the USS Olympia. And the Navy took me out of my job, and for 12 months, sent me to school so I could learn everything about the ship. I could draw the piping systems from memory. I could draw the internals of the pumps. I could draw the electrical diagrams. I could find the breakers in the dark. And I read about the problems the ship had and how they responded. And I read about the people, who was married, where they went to school, how many kids they had. And I was literally the smartest person on the planet when I flew to Hawaii to get ready to take command of the nuclear-powered submarine Olympia. And I anticipated having a significant amount of power. After all, I had a nuclear reactor. Thousands of kilowatts of power that went to these two steam turbines that drove a propeller with tens of thousands of horsepower. That's power. And I had missiles that could fly 1,000 miles and obliterate buildings. And we could shoot torpedoes that literally would blow ships in half. That's power.
Miles off the coast of Australia. The most advanced
I'm going to show this very short video. This is Australian submarine shooting an American torpedo. This is what happened.
Assisting in this exercise is a Navy destroyer, which can carry as many as 207 crewmen. The sub dives to attack them. All men are ordered to battle stations. Then, an enormous blast rips through the 2,000-ton battleship. The smoke clears, revealing that the destroyer has been blasted in two. But there are no casualties, because no one is aboard the giant naval craft. This is a torpedo launch test, and the target is a 30-year-old decommissioned ship. The destruction, however, is real. Let's watch again as the destroyer's 4 million-pound steel hull is blown out of the water. Smoke erupts from the center of the ship. Shockwaves reduce the boat's midsection to a floating pile of debris. The ragged, twisted metal proves the lethal power of this modern war machine.
That's power. So what's actually happening there is the torpedo doesn't hit the ship like you see in the movies. Basically, everything in the movies is wrong. It goes under the ship, and then it detonates, and you see the sort of the initial explosion, which is damaging. But what really sinks the ship is we blow a hole in the ocean, and gravity takes over, which, by the way, is a really reliable business partner, cheap and reliable. And the ship falls into that hole and breaks in half. But that's not what happened to me. There was another submarine out there in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, the USS Santa Fe. Now, the USS Santa Fe was the Enron of submarines. The USS Santa Fe, while I was going to 12 months of school, was the Santa Fe. It was a submarine we giggled at, and we snickered at, and we laughed at. It's like, oh, those poor bastards on the Santa Fe. They broke again. They got low scores on their inspections. And during that 12 months, of the 135 sailors on board the Santa Fe, 35 of which had the opportunity to raise their hands and re-enlist in the Navy, exactly 3 did, which put the Santa Fe at the bottom of the fleet. And the captain on the Santa Fe was supposed to be there for another year, and the Navy was about to pick the person who was going to relieve him and send him to that same 12-month school. But he raised up his hands, he says, "No mas," and he quit. Unexpectedly. And then the Navy said, "Well, we can't have a submarine without a captain." They cast their eyes around. "Marquet, you're going to go to the Santa Fe." And now I was the poor bastard on the Santa Fe. And it was scary. It was scary because it was the worst ship, and morale was bad and performance was bad. I mean, the 2 pillars. But that wasn't the scariest thing. The scariest thing about it was the Santa Fe is actually a different kind of submarine. The Santa Fe was one of the newest submarines in the fleet. So if you look on this picture, this is the Santa Fe. She doesn't have those sailplanes like the Olympia had. And that's just your clue that she's different. As one of the most modern submarines in the fleet, every piece of gear on the Santa Fe was different than every piece of gear on the Olympia. But no matter. It's the Navy, so I get dressed up in my nice white uniform. We'll have a change of command ceremony. "I relieve you, sir. I'm ready to give orders." Because on the submarine and in any organization, we have what I call a power gradient. The people at the top have more power than the people at the bottom. There's always a power gradient. Any attempt to pretend like there's no power gradient, that it's flat, is going to result in either abdication, which is going to be bad, or the fantasies of utopias and communes of which the history books are littered with. So there's a power gradient, but in the Navy, it's a pretty steep power gradient. I think one of the organizational designs that you need to make, decisions that you need to make, is how steep do I want this power gradient? And most leaders, if they're in traditional organizations, feel like they want to flatten the gradient. And I would agree with that. And they feel the way to flatten the gradient is to raise the power of the people, empowerment. But that's actually only half the equation. Well, I take command, I go down on board the Santa Fe. Now here we are in the Sonar Room on board the Santa Fe, and you see all these green lines on the screen over here. What we do, again, in the movies you might hear the sonar go ping, 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 ping. We don't do that. All we do is listen, and we convert the sound of the ocean into these green, technical term, green squiggly lines. And you can see one of them might be a cruise ship, and one of them might be an oil well, and one of them might be a school of fish, and one of them might be an enemy submarine. So it's important to sort out who's who. We spend some time on that. And these are the buttons. Oh, so many buttons. And all through the submarine, there's equipment like this with all these buttons on it. And on the Olympia, I could have literally reached over the sailor's shoulder. Even though as the captain, I really wouldn't do that. And push a button. Say, "Oh, push this one. Do that." But on the Santa Fe, it was all Greek to me. But I had this weird habit of asking the sailors, tell me about your equipment. I had 2 weeks to take over the Santa Fe. 12 months, Olympia, 2 weeks. So I asked the sailor, "Hey, tell me about your buttons here." "Well, Captain, this one does this, this does this, this does this." "Oh, okay. What about," and I always ask one question too many, "Well, what about that one?" And the poor sailor's face, "I forget." And they would cringe. Why would they cringe? Because they were expecting, "Well, I'll tell you, young man, and you really should." "Oh, yes, I should know. I'm all screwed up here." That was leadership. But the dirty secret was I didn't know the answer either. And part of me wanted to kind of protect that. Part of me wanted to go back to the Sean Connery, Russell Crowe, as depicted in the movie, leader. "Son, you should know." Anyway, and I had that going through my head, but for some reason I just said, "Well, I don't know either. Let's press it and see what happens." We attacked a Carnival cruise ship. That's bad. That's going to be reportable. It was scary. That was scary. And so here's the first fear. I had to overcome my fear of ignorance. I had to overcome my fear of looking like I didn't know the answer. But when I did that, what I did was unleash the power of curiosity, unleash the power of learning in myself and in the people. Because when the leader says, I don't know, that makes it safe for everybody in the group to say, I don't know. And if the leader's afraid of saying, I don't know, then we have meetings which are really more like theater, where no one really asks a hard question, because if we ask a hard question, the boss might know the answer. If they don't know the answer, they look like an idiot, which we already know they're an idiot, but we can't actually expose that fact. So I had to overcome my fear of ignorance in order to release the power of learning. Well, the next thing that happened was even more interesting. We get to sea. We go to sea. So remember, I just took over the worst performing, worst morale submarine in the fleet. So I'm in my head, I'm thinking, well, we're going to train hard. And one of the things we like to do on a nuclear-powered submarine is shut down the reactor. And what happens is when you shut down the reactor, you're not generating power anymore. You're running on a battery. And so the idea is we got to find the problem with the reactor and get it started up before the battery drains down. And we run on this little electric motor. The electric motor is 300 horsepower. You're pushing a 6,500-ton submarine. It's like driving your car with your blender engine. So we do this drill. Day one, we shut down the reactor. I'm standing in the control room. This is the knob we use in the control room that goes back to the engine room and orders how fast we want to go. When you have the reactor, you go 1/3, 2/3 standard, full flank, and the power, steam surges in the turbines, and the submarine goes. It's awesome. Anyway, we were on the electric motor, and you started putting along, and it had 1/3. Now I started thinking, if we speed up to 2/3, we're going to drain the battery faster, and it'll make this race harder. So I lean over to the officer of the deck. He's the person who actually gives the orders. He's the navigator. He's been on board the submarine for 2 years. And I say, hey, Nav, why don't we go ahead? It wasn't even an order. It's just, hey, why don't we go ahead 2/3 on the electric motor? And he orders it. Helm ahead 2/3. Silence. Astutely, I noticed that. I'm kind of leaning away from the periscope. I'm looking at the back of the kid who's operating this panel. His kind of shoulders were up like this. I say, hey, what's going on? He says, Captain, on this submarine, there is no 2/3 on the electric motor, just 1/3. And what had happened was when the Navy went to the newest submarine, because all the other, you don't care. Anyway, it was embarrassing, right? I'd made a mistake. But I started thinking about it, and I started thinking about the navigator, and I said, hey, Nav, did you know about this 2/3 situation? Yes, sir, I did. Well, okay, riddle me this. Why did you order it? What did he say? You told me to. We train people to be compliant and do what they're told, right? If you do what you're told, what do we do with you? We promote you. We make you the captain of a nuclear submarine. And so I realized the problem wasn't that I had made a mistake. The problem was I was the one giving orders. The problem wasn't that I made a mistake. The problem was I was the one giving orders. And so the thing that I needed to do was to shut up and stop giving orders. And this was, again, scary because now I'm fearing, it's the fear of loss of control and loss of status. Because I liked that when all day long people would come up to me, hey, Captain, what about this? Oh, do this. What about, I got a problem. Oh, I'll solve that. Here, back to you. That was great. And I gave up that sort of emotional reward to go to a place where I said, well, what do you think we should do? What do you intend to do? And we forbid the words for the officers as they talk to me. They couldn't ask permission anymore. Because in the old way, it was Captain, request permission to submerge the ship. Submerge the ship. Submerge the ship, aye. And then they would go do it. Now it's Captain, I intend to submerge the ship. Very well. Saved words. Actually, that was just the start of the conversation, because when you say I intend to, for them to ask, because I would say, well, is it safe? Are the hatches shut? That's kind of a big deal. Yes, sir, of course the hatches are shut. Well, then tell me all that. And then I would ask them, why are we submerging the ship? Why here? Why now? And then they have to tell me why. And so these are the two pillars which I now call competence and clarity. I technically need to know what's technically right? How we actually submerge, the laws of physics. And I need to understand what we're trying to do with the submarine. This is the clarity, organizational clarity piece. But once you get over that, what you would do is you unleash the power of responsibility, because now it's not me telling them what to do, but they got to come up with ideas, and it releases thinking, and it all stems from this idea that they're responsible. So I had to overcome my control issues, but I released the power of responsibility. Now here's an organization where the power gradient was too steep, and you guys all remember this. The captain gave a bad order, took the ship too close to the shore, and the press all lit up on this. Oh, he was a great, by the way, he was a good villain. I mean, anyone who falls into the first lifeboat, I mean, it's possible. It's possible. Big ocean, little lifeboat. But anyway, so he was a great villain, and the press lit up on that, and the mistakes that he had made, but that was totally missed the point. The question was, why was he the one giving orders? Because when the boss gives orders, the organization's going to follow. We sprinkle fairy dust and we say, oh, but please tell me, if you don't agree with me. Exactly 0.0 people are going to do that, okay? What you need to do is get out of the order-giving business. Long story short, it was a good news. Everything started going up on the submarine. The very next year, we enlisted 35 out of 35 sailors, every single month. So we went from the bottom to the top. We were inspected by the Navy. We got the highest score they had inspection records for ever. Everyone else said, oh, that Marquet is a clever fellow. He's giving good orders, right? That's from the paradigm. Bad leaders, right, it's not. Bad leaders give bad orders. Good leaders give good orders. But they forgot there's another door, which is great leaders give no orders. They don't have to. Because they have a team that takes initiative and proactivity and does what they need to do without being told. So I got a phone call. I mean, I was a huge fan of Stephen Covey. I gave his book to all my guys. I got a phone call. Stephen Covey wants to write. Stephen Covey's coming. And he came out and he was quiet. And he said, after a while, and he watched me not giving orders. And he said, that was boring. And he said, it's the most empowering place I've ever seen. And I said, thank you, sir. I read your book. And then he said, I haven't really seen you give any orders. I said, yeah, I'm kind of out of the order-giving business. And then he said, I know how you're doing this. I was like, well, do tell. Because for me, it felt very chaotic. It was a mess. And all these constructs I'm giving you are all just retrospective after the fact, because now I'm a management consultant, so now I have to create a construct. But at the time, I had no idea. And he says, this is what you're doing. When people come to you with, tell me what to do, you say, what do you think? And we call this the ladder of leadership. We're just moving people up this rung. And you can see level 5, I intend to, which I love, because I intend to still keeps the conversation going. I said, yeah, I think that's good. I think that's right. And this to me was an awesome leadership hack. And the idea is you don't take a huge step back. And I made that mistake, and that's abdication. You just take a little step and you move to number 2 and then another one. You don't wait for them to come forward. You say, oh, when you show proactivity initiative, then I'll let you have more responsibility. It doesn't work like that because you're in the way. You got to step back. We ask people in these conferences, what keeps people from moving up the ladder? What keeps people from expressing what they think? What keeps people from their dreams? And this is 4 continents of data, thousands of responses, and this is what people say. So it's fear on both sides. It's fear on the mind of the leader, and it's fear in their people. And so what this means is, as a leader, you have to make people feel safe. And what I was doing was all wrong. It was like I was adding stress. It's all wrong. I love the spelling bee, National Spelling Bee. These kids are so amazing. And so a couple psychologists did this study where they said, hey, if the person before gets it right, what's the impact on getting it right? And it turns out the impact is the probability goes down by between 13 and 60%. Why? Because we know the way the brain works is when you add stress, it's harder to think. Functional MRI shows your prefrontal cortex is a dark place. And so you say, oh, we have real hard work to do. I need you guys to solve this problem. And if you can't solve it, I'll find a team that can. Yeah, you just shot yourself in the foot. All right, one last little story here. We're in the sonar, back in the sonar room. If this person wanted to go on vacation, he had to get a form signed by the second in command of the submarine. It's 6 layers up. And we call this pushing information to authority, because the people on the front line know what's going on, but they don't have the authority to make a decision. So we do this, and it's slow, and it's stultifying, and then we say, oh, well, let's buy some computers. Now we can do it faster. And then we'll buy some cell phones, and we'll talk all around the world, and we'll have a whole satellite system. Right. That's not the answer. The answer is to push the authority for making the decision down to the person who natively has the information. So on the Santa Fe, I took my Navy regs, and I lined out where it said second command. I wrote in the chief of the boat. So I pushed that 4 levels down. Then I took it where it said, because the XO had to sign it for the enlisted guys, and I was supposed to sign for the officers, and I lined out my name, and I wrote in the XO. So in other words, I took myself out of making that decision. And again, I was afraid, because I was, what if they make a mistake? What if they don't do it as good as I would have done it? What if, and what if I become irrelevant? What if I take myself out of these day-to-day decisions? And really, it was this fear of relevance. But what you get, again, when you overcome this fear, is you get resilience. You get the power of resilience of the people, because now they're making decisions all at the periphery versus the Costa Concordia, where the decisions happen at the core, and they're just simply propagated out to the edge, and we all go off the edge together. Like I said, it was a good news story. We got awards and medals and all that kind of stuff. The story that was really more interesting to me was about my people. As sailor and officer after officer got promoted, and these are my guys: Dave Adams, Rick Panlilio, Mike Bernacchi, as they got selected to go be captains of nuclear submarines. And eventually I had 10 guys be captains of submarines. I had 20 officers. That's like 10 of your people go out and be CEOs of companies. It's a hugely disproportionate number. So I think this is the power of what we did, was we created more leaders. Yes, you can make more money, and yes, you can be more effective and all that kind of stuff, but it's not about that. It's about your people, and it's about my officers, because after all, I even had an officer get selected to go, three submariners, geeks with guns, got selected to go run these teams in Afghanistan. This is Caleb Kerr. He was the operations officer on the Santa Fe before this job. Here he is with the tribal elder in Helmand Province. But what happens is, when you choose, you're going to confront those fears, and you're going to overcome your fear. Your courage is acting with fear present, not, the fear doesn't go away, but we act in the face of fear. And we act in the face of our fear of ignorance, our fear of relevance, our fear of giving up control. But we end up unleashing the power of our people. And after all, isn't that what democracy is? Thank you very much.